Hello from the newsroom of Northwestern University Qatar, and welcome to the Agora, the final session of Day 2 of WISH 2020. The WISH Agoras are based on gatherings held at ancient Greek assembly places where communities would gather to share news and exchange views. Introduced back at WISH 2018, this year we've moved our Agora conversations online for reasons that I think we all know about. I'm Nick Bradshaw, Director of Outreach at WISH, and I'll be moderating today's session, which I hope will be both informal and engaging, and which posits the question, are we taking long COVID seriously enough? With me is Professor Paul, there he is. There with me is Professor Paul Garner from Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. Paul is an expert on infectious diseases and global health. He's also someone with first-hand experience of long COVID, a fact we'll come back to. Plus a panel of 12 members of the WISH community who I'll bring into the conversation in a few minutes. But first, I'd like to speak to you, Paul, to help us get an overview of the topic we're discussing tonight. Our understanding of COVID-19 has been changing rapidly. How has our knowledge of long COVID changed? I mean, put really simply, what is long COVID? I don't know, can you unmute, Paul?
Sorry. So
you can just unmute. That's great.
Yeah,
now
when COVID hit us this year, the anticipation was this was an infection that would last for a few weeks and I would either make you seriously unwell or you'd get better. And it became increasingly obvious that for a smaller percentage of people, they didn't get better straight away. In fact, the illness went on beyond 1 month. And so long COVID emerged, if you like, as a community term to reflect this emerging long tail of the disease. And it's becoming apparent that it is a whole mixture of different things. Part of it is around people that have damage to their organs, residual damage that is continuing to heal. Some people have damage to their autonomic nervous system with postural orthostatic tachycardia and a whole range of other things. However, many of these things, including the myocarditis, we see after viral infections. These are a whole range of, I think, post-viral syndromes by and large. But it is so varied, it is so different in different people. The problem has been sifting through what these symptoms means, what the pathology is, and how people should be sorted in this process.
And Paul, what's it been like to be both an infectious disease expert and a sufferer of an infectious disease, a very notorious infectious disease? I mean, what's it been like to be wearing these two hats at the same time?
I'd prefer to stick with the one role of being an expert and not a sufferer, because it is horrible. It really is a horrible disease to get. I think it's quite difficult as a medic not to over-interpret. Medics are not very good at treating themselves. So I've been very careful about being measured in what I say that's happening and express things as phenomenon rather than making bold statements about the virus is attacking my head or it's doing this or it's doing that. I have formed the view that I think a lot of what we are seeing is post-viral syndromes of various natures. You get it with chikungunya, you get it with Epstein-Barr virus, you get it with a number of viruses. People are ill for some months, sometimes years after. It's a new virus and we've got a lot of new symptoms, but people are really quite disabled by these quite frightening things that are happening to them. It messes with your head, it messes with your lungs, it messes with your body, and it messes with your mind. So this has also caused a lot of fear and frightened people about it's not going to go away, why isn't there treatment, and so on.
Which brings us to the crux of this discussion, which is, are we taking long COVID seriously enough? We, being the healthcare community, and I suppose we, the wider society.
Yeah, I mean, I think when, as Claire and others on this call will recognise, in the early days, because these were not recognised and because there was no sort of obvious physical signs indicating disease, and because generally fatigue and post-viral syndromes are badly managed by doctors on the whole, there is little sympathy often for people, and symptoms are often dismissed as being in people's heads. Initially, there was skepticism, I think, on the part of the community, and you do see this massive community action to highlight this, and now people are seeing it's there. In a sense, it is these post-viral syndromes are now being investigated with an intensity that has never been seen in any kind of post-viral condition, and the problem, my own personal view, is there is a danger in all these quite modest changes that are being found on tests are actually causing extreme terror in patients. And actually, you know, one of the things that people need to get better is some reassurance that things will probably resolve, that they're not going to be permanently damaged, and that they are likely to have a good outcome. I can't guarantee that, but to a certain extent, the heavy investigation that's going on is helpful, but we have to remember what impact it has on the patients in finding things that we functionally don't actually know what they mean long term.
Well, thanks, Paul. Thanks for that to get the discussion going. We've now heard from our expert. Now let's go and hear from our panel. So welcome to our jury of 12, a number of whom I know have been dealing with long COVID. I know Paul met some people, he mentioned the name there before came on air. So I want to turn first to some of the people here who have had or who are currently dealing with long COVID. What's the importance of listening to people with lived experience and the use of the term long COVID in research and policy making? I don't know if anybody wants to answer that. Claire, would you like to answer?
Yes, please, I would. The importance of listening to patients is absolutely key. And I guess that also goes hand in hand with using the term long COVID. The term was initially coined by an Italian lady who's living with long COVID, Elisa Perigo, who's an academic. And the term has been widely adopted internationally. It is succinct, it is patient-made, it is open. It doesn't prejudge anything by the use of words such as post anything or using the word syndrome. Patients feel very strongly that we need to use this term. It's actually being used, there's a French equivalent, hashtag Covid long, and it's being used in the media, predominantly in the UK, but also in the US and possibly beyond, in Australia, for example. I don't know about other non-English speaking countries. So it's a term that is universally being used, frankly. And as I say, it has a certain openness about it. It's not prejudging the mechanisms. It's not attaching any language which is associated with existing conditions, because we simply don't understand enough about it. So, and I think one of the key things about it is that because it's patient-made, this term, we discovered this condition. We shouted about the existence of our condition, having been felt very invisible for many weeks, as understandably the focus was on people with very severe illnesses. but actually a lot of us are taking longer to recover even than some of the severe cases. So I cannot emphasize enough the need to use the patient term. It's been used in scientific literature, it's been used in the media widely, it's been used by the UK government, it's been used in the by the WHO.
And Claire,
so stick with a term that everybody knows, and actually put patients right at the
Claire,
centre of this. We know what we're talking about.
Claire, if I can just interrupt there on one thing there and bring some other people in, thank you for that. But there was, Paul mentioned post-viral, which is the recognised way of looking at things within the medical context. Do you find the term post is an issue because it kind of gives that sense that we're talking about something that happened and now we are dealing in something which is a long way from that? And I've even heard, you know, that we talk about the long tail, but a long tail sounds like it's going to be very thin at the end, and we don't really know that yet. We don't know quite how that's going to be.
Quite. I think, as you say, the word tail implies a diminishing, and I think the word post also does, regardless of the dictionary definition of words such as post or syndrome. They do come with connotations that actually demean the severity of some of the symptoms. And also people talk about the acute phase and subsequent phases. Well, for many patients, they don't see a distinction. There's been a continuum where some symptoms may have improved or alleviated or even gone away, but whole other very severe symptoms can happen even months down the line. So I think to use the word post, it makes certain judgments that I don't think that we can actually make at this point.
I mean, Paul, what do you think about that? What do you think about the term post? Because you used it, and as I said, it's a very recognised term within the medical profession. If you could put your mic on, sorry, Paul. I think you've been muted.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I'm not here really to argue about terminology. I think there's a whole load of different things happening in this collective term post-COVID. I don't have any objection to it. But what I do think is concerning is that we somehow are creating this into something that is totally brand new and has never been seen before. And there are many of the things that are happening in long COVID have happened with other viruses in different ways and different forms, and we must draw on that knowledge. So I respect the term. I'm pretty agnostic on it, really. I do think from the medical side of things, we need to chop it up into all the different bits that it consists of, the damage to the lungs, the damage to the autonomic system, the misfiring that causes the fatigue. We need to divide it up in order to work out what are the best treatments and the best therapies for the different groups. So there's not going to be one treatment for long COVID. There's going to be a whole series of different mixtures of things going on at different points in time. And I don't think we should get too tied up with this.
Thanks, Paul. Going back to the group, I mean, what effect does it have on those with long COVID of looking for physical pathology with tests that are unlikely to find anything? You know, the effect on the mental health, the just general effect on people. I can see. Is there anybody there who wants to? Talia, I think.
Talia one of the main
issues. You can unmute.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the main issues is that many people living with COVID are going through cycles. So I got COVID in April, and then I've gone on to have 2 quite nasty relapses. The one in September actually saw me back in bed for a month, which is 6 months after I first got the illness. I had oxygen levels when I did my walking test of 84%. That's 6 months after the first illness, and that's recovered since. it goes in cycles. So you have the sore throats, you have the fevers, you have the headaches, and then it progresses into breathing issues. And so I think the issue we've got here is, why are people having these recurring cycles, and why are people's oxygen levels recovering and then 4 weeks later dropping again? My symptoms have been so bad in the last 7 months that I've been tested for various cancers, MS, lupus. All of them fortunately came back okay, but there's no treatment for no answers. So I now have tablets to help lower my heart rate. I'm only
and what's
27.
it like? You're how, 27?
I'm only 27 yet, and I'm now taking tablets to lower my heart rate. I'm taking tablets to help me get to sleep. I'm doing various physio, but I've only just been able to go back to work part-time in the last week or so.
And are healthcare providers taking people with long COVID seriously? Joe, let's bring you in on that.
Hi, thank you for having us on. It's one of the really strongly recurring things on the group is that people feel not believed, and that has a really compounding impact on their health and their stress. And the physical and the mental health issues are quite important together. Paul talked about about chopping up things, and it's true. You want specialists to look at different areas, but there's also a need to take a look at the picture of the whole and how physical and mental health are dealt with together. Honestly, that it comes up so much that people feel frustrated that they're not believed, and then the opposite is true. People find that when they are listened to and given the time and heard and believed, even though there's not maybe a lot of treatments available, they describe it as a watershed in their recovery. It's really, really important for them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm going to just bring in some people who haven't had long COVID, who aren't suffering from long COVID, to see if anybody else out there has any thoughts they want to bring in. Maybe there's somebody from the medical profession amongst us, I'm not sure, honestly, or anybody else who has a comment they'd like to make, or question to ask to our expert. If you raise your hand, yes, I see with the headphones, you're raising your hand.
Yep. Hi, Nick. It's Ian Tully. I'm Chief Executive of the Mental Health Service at Hamad Medical Corporation in Qatar. It's interesting, the question, are we taking long COVID seriously enough? And it's been very interesting to hear people's comments about the impact on psychological well-being and mental health, and the suggestion that people are not believed or are made to feel as if it's their problem rather than the system. One of the things that we are doing in Qatar on the 15th of September this year, Hamad Medical Corporation's Mental Health Service and Qatar University launched a joint research study. It's a longitudinal study to investigate the social and psychosocial impact of COVID. And it's being a longitudinal study, we've got a number of people who we will follow the cohort through at 3, 6, 9 and 12 months to see what longer term impact has been on psychological well-being, and try to understand why in some cases people seem to do better and don't suffer as badly from anxiety and or depression, but others seem to continue way beyond. So we'll follow that through the whole of the next 12 months, and we're measuring things like sleep, concentration, mood, decision making, etc., and also the energy levels of people. You know, people have talked about fatigue. There's a question about, is that because of sleep deprivation? Is it because of the virus itself? So I think it gives us an opportunity to look at the immediate impact of COVID itself, but then the longer term impact of long COVID move forward. So I think we could learn a lot from that in terms of managing such epidemics or traumatic circumstances in the future.
Thanks, Ian. I appreciate that. I noticed, Faris, you had your hand up earlier. If you unmute yourself.
Yeah. So I just had
Hi,
several
Faris.
questions to Dr. Hi. Yeah, sorry, let me clarify. I'm Faraz Anmir. I'm a Research and Policy Development Officer from WISH, and I had a question for Dr. Paul Garner, but it can be extended to the long COVID sufferers as well. Obviously, with a condition as this, you're going to have some level of dependency, and there's going to be family and friends around you that might cater to your needs. What advice would you extend to them from the other side, knowing that they might not fully understand what you're going through?
I think that's a good question.
So this is how can people be better? Yeah, sorry, Paul.
Yeah, no, I mean, sorry, I mean, I was thinking about it in terms of the illness being recognized. So the sort of the implication is that it's simply medical professionals that are denying that it's happening. But actually, this is a society-wide thing. I have friends that I know that are doctors that are even concerned about telling their partners about what's going on inside their heads because it is so strange and so unfamiliar and so threatening to them. So I do think this awareness of the condition and sympathy of your friends and your community around you is very important, because if you've got it, the first thing you say when friends see you is say, "Oh my God, you look well. There can't be anything wrong with you." And immediately you're having your illness and you say, "Yes, but it's not like that. I actually," and so it's very, very important that that there is a broader understanding, because people do need love and support and gentleness and things to help take away the fear. They need to feel secure to help them and their bodies recover. They need space to recover. They need to rest and so forth. So I do think it's a good question. Claire may have some.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring in a couple more in now. I'm just going to ask very quickly, how draining is it to have to advocate for a better understanding of long COVID? Leslie, I don't think we've heard from you. Leslie, if you can unmute and speak. And I saw Joe had her hand up as well. So Leslie, if you go first.
Nick, yeah, just picking up what Paul's just said about we need to rest, but if people don't believe you, you don't get that option. So we have spent the last 8-9 months since this phenomenon emerged trying desperately to find out what's happening to us. So I find it really interesting. We're doing this online Agora today, and the equivalent of getting together in person is now online. And so whilst I agree with Paul that this is not a brand new phenomenon, we have learnt from previous post-viral illnesses what might help us. What is completely new is the fact that absolutely everything in the status quo has been disrupted because we're in a global pandemic. And as a result, that's changed the relationships between everything, including between patients and doctors. So what we've discovered is that we've been able to organise as patients online through Facebook, through Twitter, and through Slack, globally and locally. And as a result of that, we have done lots of research into what's already available. The ME community and CFS community immediately stepped forward and said, this could be post-viral. Whatever you do, don't exercise. Don't think you've got to build yourself back up again. And we know lots of patients previously very fit in their 20s, 30s and 40s who went back to training and are now incredibly disabled. So that appears to have been good advice for those who followed it. I myself had post-viral fatigue in a previous life, but this is also different. I can see where it's the same and I can see where it's different. And I was smug and I thought I'd get better because I would just do what I did when I'd had Epstein-Barr, and that didn't work. I still got long-term long COVID. So it is frustrating that we are having to spend as much time as we are shouting to be heard, as Claire said, right from the get-go. So I could echo everything that's been said about how important it is to hear patients, to believe patients, to get past the, is this real, should we be doing something about it, to actually listen to find out from us, what have we learned? Because we've learned a huge amount by doing what people used to do in the Agoras in person, get together to draw on each other's knowledge. We've been doing that in groups 30,000. That's a pretty big research study. We have got incredibly talented, clever, accomplished people within our support group who are also medics, who are also change management specialists, who are also strategic consultants, we have done a heck of a lot of legwork, and we have got a lot of great data that we can show people. The gentleman, Ian, who talked about a study in Qatar, we have been involved in designing some research studies in Scotland. We've been involved in a research conference that's taking place in December in the United Kingdom, because when you get to sit down with medics and explain what we have discovered, they realise how valuable that is. And so, as Claire said in the very first question, it's so important that the patient is at the centre. So even this idea that doctors come along and brush aside long COVID and wish to call it something different disrespects the fact that we're actually the people with lived evidence of the syndrome in a way that other people haven't. And as you say, even doctors haven't necessarily come out to their colleagues about the fact they have it because of the stigma that people have experienced before. So I'm unabashed. I'm quite happy to talk about what's happened to me. Not everyone is. So we need people to come forward and be the voice of patients. And we absolutely need researchers who are sympathetic, empathetic, and don't want to come in and start reinventing wheels. We don't want a blank sheet of paper. We want to look at what's already been tried and tested. And we want that to be rolled into studies.
So I feel... Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I know we're running out of time. I just want to mention, I think it's longcovid.org, if people want to check things out, and also the Long COVID support group has, as was just mentioned, around 30,000 members, part of that. Joe, if you can keep something to 30 seconds, and then I'm going to go to Ahmed to make a comment as well. Sorry, Joe.
That's fine. I wanted to touch on the question about how we can kind of share our stories and let other people know how it feels, because my son had ME from Epstein-Barr and we supported him, but we didn't get it. And now he looks after us. So I think there's something about sharing beyond symptoms, which is sharing stories and narratives. And that's where we bring in a wider circle. So it's not just patients supporting each other and patients and health and social care working together, but also working with media and storytellers to bring out a broader narrative that helps people understand what it really feels like.
Great, thanks, Joe. I mean, we're here for the next 3 more nights, and a number of our panel will be here on different nights. So if they're not being heard today, they will be heard across the week. I'm going to bring Ahmed, and then I'm going to go to Paul for a closing comment. So, Ahmed? It is Ahmed there, is it?
Nick. Thank you, yes.
Yes.
My name is Dr. Ahmed Elmir. I'm a medical resident in Hamad Medical Corporation. I'm speaking from my personal experience, having worked with COVID patients for a few months. We were deployed earlier on, and we were dealing with more acute cases of COVID. So firstly, thank you of you who shared your experiences. Personally, for me, they were very revealing. I'll be brief in saying that I think the best way for physicians to understand how to recognize and deal with long COVID is to appreciate that in a hospital setting or in a healthcare setting, physicians are very goal-oriented in their care. When they look at a patient who has a condition, they want to know, firstly, does this need treatment? And secondly, am I the person who should be treating it? To that end, I think what would help with long COVID is having an internationally recognized definition. And though this may seem a bit facetious to some, because long COVID is obviously a myriad of symptoms and experiences, it's very important for us to have some kind of tangible criteria that healthcare providers can understand, because that will allow them to recognize what long COVID is. In the same way we recognize what asthma attacks are and heart attacks are when we meet people in emergency departments, if we have a globally recognized definition of what long COVID is, preferably endorsed by international medical organizations, that I think will be a positive step in helping healthcare providers understand what they're looking at.
Great, thank you, Ahmed. So before we close today, I just want to come back to Paul. And Professor, you, as I said at the start, you have experienced long COVID, and you are obviously an expert in the field. How do you see things playing out over the next 6 months, 12 months? Everybody talks about the idea of having a vaccine, which is obviously a vital piece of the puzzle. But what about the people who have long COVID, who will get long COVID? How do you see it playing out over the time to go? Is there some hope from your experience? Do you think this will be 2 years down the line, we'll all be saying it was horrible, but most people, they've now recovered?
Yeah, I mean, the data from SARS was pretty horrific, with the Toronto data of a third still being ill at 3 years. My own, going back to Leslie's point about using personal stories, my own personal story with one particular form of long COVID related to brain fog and extensive fatigue, but limited lung involvement, is that part of the solution relates to dismissing Descartes' dualism between the mind and the body. And part of getting over this is about resetting your expectations. It's about trying to not be catastrophic in your thinking. It's about looking forward to the future and being kind to yourself. Now, I know that sounds very sort of holistic and so forth, but I honestly believe that we have to be careful within our long COVID communities of setting up a dichotomy against medicine, against society. We need to work together to improve and help ourselves move forward with these physical symptoms and these related disorders.
I mean, really, that's been, for me, I mean, I work at Wish. We talk about bringing people together, global collaboration. We often don't have patients that involved, and I'm really pleased that we're seeing patients involved now. Sorry, I can see with your hand up, you can make a quick comment. If you if you unmute and speak very quickly, like 10, 20 seconds, we can just about fit something in. Sorry.
Is that me, Nick? Yeah. Just
yes, it is, yeah.
What Paul was saying about collaboration, that's absolutely what we want. We want, as patients, to collaborate with the medical profession. We are not setting up a dichotomy against anyone. We are incredibly intelligent people who get that this is about how to work in partnership. And actually, going forward out of COVID-19, we're all having to learn to collaborate and work in partnership because everything is interrelated. So I do think we need to give patients credit for wanting to find solutions and to coming up with lots of practical things that we can share with doctors, because we don't want to be labelled in the way patient support groups perhaps were in the past, because we're a digital age 21st century patient groups that are organising and actually achieving quite a lot of useful things. Thank you.
That's great. And I think on that kind of positive note, we asked the question at the start, are we taking long COVID seriously enough? I hope that we are. I hope that these conversations happen more and more. I hope that people get the support they need. Thank you for being part of this session. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, panel. That's it for day 2 of Wish 2020. It's been a long day. We'll see you all again tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.
Thank you.